Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Real Talks. I'm your host, David Steele. So this is a little special stream, and this is going to be the very first Ask Me Anything stream. Um, basically, this is going to be the one time, one of the times you guys are going to be able to ask me anything you want. So it's basically it's I'm an open book, within reason. There's I only have like there's a very few hello Coco. So there's a very few number of things obviously I won't talk about. Okay. Abortion, politics, and religion. Those three are everything else, okay? Everything else is fair game. So okay, that's fine. Um so everything else is fair game. So before we jump into anything, I just wanted to really quickly touch upon the major drop. And it looks like this is going to drop by almost 75%. And I'm talking about the Flash. The Flash is going to plummet like a rock. And this just is not good for not only Warner Brothers, but the film and everything else. So, um, right now it looks like Spider Verse is going to be fighting with Elemental to take that top spot, and this is crazy. So I'm not going to read the article. I had it up there, but it does look like Spider Verse and Elemental will be fighting for the number one slot this week at the box office, and this just adds to all of the mystery and everything else. What is going to be surrounding this, and how does it work, and everything else. It does say, however, without going into too much detail about it, that it looks like it's going to get um, only between 14 to 16 million dollars, and it's actually going to be third behind Elemental and Across the Spider Verse, and that's horrible. I mean, we had Ant Man drop 66%, but and right now, as it stands, okay, uh, they both have one is 18.5 million, the other is 18.2 million. So I mean, it just gets worse and worse and worse for Warner Brothers. So I just think that you know something's gonna have to happen at some point. You know, I mean, I absolutely I think I want to go see Spider Verse again. Um, I didn't get a chance to experience an IMAX, but and of course Elementals out there. So it's one of those things where we got one more week, really, or really until the end of this week, and then um, on Thursday, Indiana Jones will be making its previews, and then we'll have a whole new set of things. I fully expect Indiana Jones to make a huge debut. I don't know how much, but that will be something to really look forward to. And so, I mean, Elemental is right there too. Um, it's going to make about 18.5, $20 million. And I've said it before, this isn't any breaking news or anything, but, I said when one of these films falters, the other one's going to jump up and take its money. And you're seeing that with The Flash. I mean, you saw it with Ant-Man back in March, but that was a little different. This is right in the middle of the summer. And lots of questions have to be asked of Warner Brothers. And with David Zaslav, too. I mean, Zaslav, I think, is a big part of this, and he has a lot to answer for because at the end of the day, he's the man driving the bus. He's the man driving the truck. And, whether it's him trying to sell off, properties and things, whether it's him, having a disaster with the Flash, whether it's him, not wanting to pay the writers, whatever it is. And I get it, he's a businessman. But you know, I don't really. Something needs to change with Warner Brothers. Something really needs to change with Warner Brothers. And whether it's this James Gunn thing that's going to help revitalize that or everything else, it's yet to be seen. And I think that, you know, the longer this writer strike goes on, hey, Dad, how are you? The longer this writer strike goes on, the worse it was going to be. I was just basically talking about the box office when you came in. So, I mean, it looks like The Flash is going to drop all the way to third place, and Elemental and um, Spider Verse are going to be fighting over who is going to be the number one slot. So, yeah. But if you guys, so that I just wanted to put that out there. I mean, we'll talk more about the box office numbers on Monday and how that's going to come about. But if you guys, if you come in here and you see this and you're curious about what it is, it's exactly what it is. It's Ask Me Anything. So as I said before, only three things are off limits, and I put a tweet out too about it. Only three things off limits. Okay, abortion, politics, and religion. Everything else is fair game. So you know, so Coco, I have three questions for you. Are you married or with anyone? Is your background real? And what is your favorite movie of all time? So the answer to your question is no, I'm not. I'm single. Okay. My background is not real. Okay. It is a green screen. And my favorite movie of all time is going to be Silence of the Lambs, the 1991 movie with Anthony Hopkins and directed by Demi Moore and Jodie Foster and Scott Glenn. So that is my favorite movie of all time. My room is actually a mess. My room is actually a mess, and I would never, I would, I wouldn't subject you guys to that. So, but yeah, I mean, so that's, the first thing so to your point, Coco, the first thing I noticed was this going on YouTube. And by the way, thank you everybody who's going to stop in here and watch this and everything else. And by the way, guys, I should say this: hit the like and subscribe button because there's a ton of content on there. And you know, I can't say any more than that. I mean, Dad is a member, and if you actually want to support me and do anything like that, just hit that join button. Okay, I know Dad is, and hopefully he's starting to build that up. Um, there's three levels there. One is $2.99, one is $5.99, the other is $9.99. Anyways, getting back to that, the one thing I really learned about YouTube early on was this: people would come in here and they would leave very quickly, and I was trying to figure out what was going on with this, and then I realized, oh, it's my room. So I went out to Amazon. I ordered the green screen that is behind me. Okay, and it was $30 and it looks luxurious. I promise I'm not in this. I would take this off, but I don't want to scare you guys away. Okay. So yeah, it's definitely a green screen. And yeah. So Kevin, do you think Warner Brothers will finish in the top five domestic box office in the United States this weekend? If you're talking about this weekend, I think they'll definitely finish in the top five. So it looks like the Flash is going to be number three, and Elemental is going to be fighting for the one and two spots. So, but they are going to take a serious hit. It is going to drop almost 70%. And consider this, guys: Ant-Man only dropped 65%. So that tells you something. Dad, if you had carte blanche, what franchise would you remake? Who would you be your all-star cast and why? Okay. Um, franchise. Because that's tough. I mean, there have been so many franchises over so many years. I mean, you've got Bond, you've got Transformers. I would probably remake. Hmm. I wouldn't remake Mission Impossible. I would probably make. Um, maybe the Batman franchise. You know what I might do, Dad? I might do it as a um, a full lifetime. So instead of seeing like full Batman episodes with villains and everything else, I think what I might do is do a complete overhaul of the franchise and start it linear. Okay, so we see Bruce Wayne from the very beginning. His parents get murdered. In the first film, he's starting to try and figure out kind of like something like Gotham, okay, where we see young villains. And then in the next film, we see him in his mid 20, he starts to slowly become he gets gadgets and everything else, and then he starts to become more inventive. And then maybe in the third Batman, that's when he's really starts to go out and be that young year one, year two crime fighter. And in the fourth film, I would probably have him go full blown Batman, like full blown Joker, Riddler. Pick a couple of villains for each, and then you could go that. So to answer your question, I would probably do the Batman franchise, and I would go linear all the way through instead of picking. And obviously, and every single Batman you'd have to be, different. Like you couldn't have the same person in the first film that you had in the third film. So I would have them progressively get older. Thanks for. Oh no, you have a good day, Coco. Take care of yourself. I'll see you later. End of the year box office domestic 2023. So right now, as it stands today, okay, um, we've only had one film make $1 billion. Okay, and so you say, well, why is $1 billion the number? Well, you got to look at it like this because everything is judged in how much money is made. That being said, okay, if you take a look at the yearly things, okay, so worldwide, okay, as it stands right now, we've only had $1 billion movie, and that 1.3, and that was Super Mario Brothers. Now you go back to last year, okay, there were they had one Avatar that came out that made 2.3 billion, Top Gun Maverick with 1.49, called 1.5, and Jurassic World Dominion. So as it stands right now today, okay, feature films have only made, oh, I don't know. I mean, the box office is about, I don't know, $4 billion. I mean, we're not going to get all, to answer your question, Kevin, we're not going to get all the way back to the pre-pandemic numbers by 2027. Okay, it was a report that just came out about that last week. The other thing too is depending on the writer's strike, okay, all this stuff's going to get pushed back. So when all this stuff gets pushed back, you're waiting later and later and later and later. And I think it's going to really depend on, like, we're all going to be okay for the rest of this year. We're going to be okay for the middle of next year. But once June, July start coming in for 2024, it's going to be interesting. I mean, we're never going to get back to 2019 numbers. We're not. I mean, that was Avengers Endgame. So, if I had to put a number, I would say 5, 6, 7 billion, which is still quite a bit of money in the grand scheme of things. Okay. Hey, Dave, watched The Flash for the third final time today, and I wanted to ask you 3 questions. Number 1, favorite Michael Keaton film. Number 2, favorite animated film. Number 3, favorite actor. Okay, so let's go off in order. Favorite Michael Keaton film. He's done a lot of great films. A lot of great films. I mean, Clean and Sober, Batman, Birdman. But I'm going to pick one that's a little not off the beaten path, but it's an amazing performance and won Best Picture, and that's Spotlight. I thought Spotlight, and it's so good, guys. I might even be doing that later on in the year for my perfect movie series. I thought it was amazing. His performance in Spotlight was second to none. Loved it. Favorite animated movie? Um, I'm gonna go pretty basic here. I'm gonna go The Lion King. I mean, The Lion King, just for what it was, you had the soundtrack, you had, you had the story, the coming of age story, okay, and with Simba and Mufus, his father, and then Scar, and then that was really the golden time. I mean, we all talk about like way back when, but as far as like the '90s, you take a look at the '90s for animated films, it was amazing. Um, and so that is the one I would do. And favorite actor, hmm, I I would have to probably say, in all honesty, Denzel Washington. Denzel is one of the either Denzel or Tom Hanks. I think Denzel, but edges him out a little, just because you look at his range. I mean, he's done everything from you know Glory to Malcolm X to American Gangster to, and he's going to be in the new Gladiator movie. I mean, just anything. Equalizer. That's the first franchise he's ever done. Just everything and anything that man. Fences. He's even done the Great Debaters. I mean, his performances. I mean, hell, he just got nominated for Othello a couple years ago. Roman J. Esquire. There's so many Flight. I'm just thinking there are so many Philadelphia. There are so many great films he's done. Tom Hanks is right in that conversation too. He's right in that conversation. I mean, as a matter of fact, he was actually won his first Academy Award for Philadelphia. But nonetheless, so I would probably go with Denzel in that respect. Domestic box office in this year. Oh, Disney, Universal, Sony, Paramount, Warner Brothers. Yeah, I mean, Disney is going to. They're always going to be there. And don't forget, Disney. You've got they have the Marvel stuff, so they're always going to be there. Um, Sony is going to do well with Across the Spider Verse, and they have some other stuff coming out. Paramount's Mission Impossible. I mean, and, they're always going to have stuff coming out. Warner Brothers is going to take the biggest hit. Um, because the thing is, we don't know how Blue Beetle is going to do. But what I will say is this, and I said it before with the Flash. Shazam was a litmus test for the Flash. We all saw how the Flash is going to do. It's going to drop 70% this week. Okay. Don't be shocked by the end of the summer, by the end of July, frankly, or the middle of July, if it's out on home video. You can get it on iTunes. That being said, then you got Blue Beetle. Blue Beetle is this first character that's going to be starting this universe and everything else, and that's great. But I really wonder how it's going to do because of the Flash. And are people really going to go back and watch it because of that? And I wonder. And then, of course, you have Aquaman at the end of the year, which right now, everything that, I mean, not that I'm an insider, but everything I've heard is just horrible. Absolutely horrible. And I don't think you can discount that. I mean, we really have to wait until 2024, 2025, you know, and how are they going to rebound? I mean, Warner Brothers is in such bad debt right now with this movie. Okay, not only for this movie, then you're going to be talking about Blue Beetle, then you're going to be talking about Aquaman. They've spent over $1 billion. How do they recover from this? That's going to be the major question. So Disney Animation Studios is better than Pixar. Sony Animation, Illumination, where the films come for kids. Excuse me. So Disney Animation just doesn't get enough love. They don't. Okay. Um, and now I know they have some other stuff coming, down the pipeline. Pixar, they are it's going to be fascinating what happens with Pixar. Because, of course, what happened with Chapek and that whole thing, he put those three films on streaming, Turning Red and a couple others, and he has to recondition these people, recondition the general audience to basically go out to the theaters. And that's pretty much why Elemental didn't do so hot, even though it's getting stellar reviews. As a matter of fact, it's going to be in the number one or number two slot right now, and that's going to be good moving forward. Um, so I mean, you've got Wish coming out, you've got Ilio coming out. They've already announced a Toy Story 5, so it will take a little bit of time. And Toy Stories, even though I haven't seen Toy Story 4, but from what I understand, it wasn't as good. But Toy Story is always going to be, if as long as Tom Hanks um, and Tim Allen come back, yeah, you'll be fine with that. You'll be absolutely fine with that. If you could transport yourself into any movie setting, which one? Mine would be Casablanca, and that's a good choice. Any movie setting. Um, I would probably say Star Wars. I mean, it's one of those things where I am always, I'm a rebel. I'm not, I'm a little conservative, but I like to have, not that I'd be a Sith. I'd probably be a Jedi, but but it's the whole aspect, right? I mean, it's that whole space opera fantasy type of thing with the blasters and the lightsabers and the droids and who knows, you find a princess, so I would definitely, I think I would say Star Wars. I think Transformers would be eh, okay, but I think Star Wars for me would definitely do it. Did you see the rumor for the new Deadpool 3, by the way? It said that Ben Affleck might reprise his role as Matt Murdock, Daredevil in the movie, and personally, I'm here for it. So, I did briefly see this, and so multiverse right now is the big thing. It's the big thing right now. I mean, Ant-Man, Wasp, Quantumania, Spider-Man, Across the Spider-Verse, The Flash. Okay. I don't need to see that. And it's not that I don't want to see Ben Affleck. I don't. I think he's a good actor. I mean, it's I what I'll say is this. It's one thing this is why I don't like fan casting type of thing. It's one thing to say, "Oh, I want to see X person play Superman or Y person play Lois Lane," because the expectation is there, right? So if they're if they're an actor in another movie, you're like, oh, they would be good in that. But that's why they have casting calls and casting directors and actors that play the roles. If if the story works for it, and it is a multiverse story, I think it'd be great. Okay, if it doesn't, I don't think it will work. And the other thing too is the big thing about Deadpool 3 was that Hugh Jackman's coming back, right? That is the big allure of this movie. Everybody knows what they're going to get with Ryan Reynolds, but it's Hugh Jackman coming back, and it's oh my god. And I think that that would kind of spoil the. Sorry, guys, my internet. Um, that would kind of spoil it. Not spoil it. I don't want to say spoil it, but it would definitely, because Hugh Jackman is the draw, right? He is the allure of this movie, coming back as Wolverine. We all know this. Bring Ben Affleck. You've already got one name coming back. I wouldn't necessarily do another one. Also, Dial of Destiny's Rotten Tomatoes score went up. Last time I checked, was sitting at 62%. Yeah, I mean, look, it's starting to get better and better and better reviews now that, because Cannes is one of those, you take a calculated risk if you're Lucasfilm putting your movie in Cannes, because if it doesn't blow their socks off and these reviewers get all this stuff, okay, they're going to come out and say, well, it was mediocre, and that's already going to downplay, and be like, oh, do I really want to see this movie? Especially if you're on a budget. And that being said, I don't think you want to put yourself in any more risk or harm than you have to. Now, they have gone up, and that's great. So it's gonna do quite well, I think. I mean, we've all seen it too, where there are films that are reviewed, and you go, and the critics don't like it, and the fans love it. So there's something to be said there too. I think that will go up. Deadpool 3 is going to be him killing the Fox universe. Yeah, oh no. Deadpool 3 is going to pay off all of these different um, jokes in the first two movies. I guarantee you. I guarantee you. I guarantee you that we haven't heard it yet, but I wouldn't be shocked if you saw Josh Brolin come back. Right? I wouldn't be shocked because that's what they love to do. It's getting Ryan Reynolds getting the payoff for it. Okay? People don't realize this. Deadpool is one of, I mean, right up there with Spider Man, Deadpool is one of the most popular characters in the MCU. Hands down. Because he doesn't care. He doesn't care who he offends, and he makes jokes out of it. And that's why he's so good. So, um, what's your favorite performance by an actor, any genre, not necessarily your favorite actor, just most memorable? I think it has to be okay. I think, and I'm gonna go back to the same movie. I think it has to be Silence of the Lambs. Anthony Hopkins. Um, so this when I was 13, I think 13 or 14, I went to go see that movie with my mom, and it was a drive-in, and they were showing Dances with Wolves and Silence of the Lambs, and Dances with Wolves was first. But I remember, and I read the book for Silence of the Lambs first, and it's about the only book I've ever read that was like dead accurate to I mean, usually with an adaptation you have changes. This one was like flat on. But that performance, I mean, I've seen the film since 50, 60, 70 times, no joke. I can recite the dialogue verbatim. But that performance that Hopkins gives really set the tone for years to come. If you look at all of the movies about, and I hate it, but about serial killers. So it's when you do the backstory, I'm all about the backstory of these things. So, for example, like John Douglas, who was one of the most prolific profilers of all time. You know, you can go back and Google him and look at his stuff. He interviewed some of these guys, and what they based Lecter on, or Buffalo Bill on, was some of the traits of it was like Ed Gein, the guy from Psycho, okay, and Ted Bundy. But it was so revolutionary, okay, and what it did and how it did it and everything else. So, and he was only in the film like 15 or 16 minutes, and he never blinked. If you go through and watch that movie again, he never blinked once, or very, very rarely. But I think he never blinked once. So the answer to your question, Dad, is Anthony Hopkins. Silence of the Lambs. 20th Century Studios has good films. The Menu, Eyes of Tammy Faye, Nightmare Alley, Barbarians, but most don't get the love they deserve at the boxes. So I love the Menu. I love the Menu. I love the Menu. I think that was fantastic. I went to go see that last year and did the podcast about that. But I love The Eyes of Tammy Faye. I love that movie. That was a huge talk about two powerhouse actors with Andrew Garfield and Jessica Chastain. I was so happy to see her win the Academy Award that night. So happy because she is such a great actress that just, I mean, whether she's in directing Zero Dark 30 or she's in Molly's Game or she's doing Eyes and Tammy Faye or whatever. And there's something to be said there too about the habits of the Academy. I mean, they love biopics. I mean, you can go back all the way to 1983 with Gandhi, with Ben Kingsley. But more recently, in the last 15 years, all the biopics that have won. I mean, whether it was '08 with Gary Oldman for The Darkest Hour, or whether it was Bohemian Rhapsody, or, whatever it is. So, yeah, I mean, Nightmare Alley, I've not seen that, but I know Bradley Cooper is very good in that. So, I wanted to ask you another very interesting question also. What's your favorite installment in a franchise that most fans or critic hated, or a movie in general, perhaps, that has a rotten score? So, installment in a franchise that most fans hated. Um, I think okay, it's a little off the beaten path, but I think it might answer your question, and that's Hannibal, the film by Ridley Scott. I think, and I think it's a film that really doesn't get enough love. And there was so much anticipation and so much buildup because, oh my God, we're going to get a sequel to Silence of the Lambs, blah, 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 blah. And Anthony Hopkins signed on and everything else. And, then when it hit, it was like, oh, really? And so I really, really liked it. Okay. Gary Oldman plays Mason Verger. You would never know it because of the prosthetics. You've got Anthony Hopkins, you've got Julianne Moore, you've got, you know, so I would say Hannibal. And I think that a lot of people don't like Hannibal. Mind you, this is by the same guy that did um Gladiator, right? I mean, this is the same guy that did, a lot of other. I mean, look, House of Gucci was terrible. I'll be the first one to admit that. Okay, I never got around to the last duel, but yeah, I mean, I think that's a really underrated um, thing, and I would say it's a favorite. It's a favorite in that, even though that you know a lot of people don't really care about. Um, favorite guilty pleasure movie. Hmm. You know what it is? So I just did this podcast the other day of it. It's The Running Man. I love The Running Man. So anybody who's not familiar with it, it's the 1987 film starring Arnold Schwarzenegger and Richard Dawson. And essentially, it's set in this dystopian world where IGN is the only broadcast thing in the world. Okay. And I mean, so basically, Schwarzenegger plays Ben Richards, and he's part of the army, and he doesn't want to kill these people. Anyways, IGN basically manipulates it to where he gets put on this game show, and they essentially try to kill him, and he goes through and he kills everybody else. And I love Richard Dawson's performance. Um, I'm a game show buff at heart. I've been watching it since I was a little kid. I love, love, love The Running Man, and I think that was one of those. And once again, I'm all about not being editing. I mean, watching the film as it was originally intended. But yeah, so to answer that question, it's going to be The Running Man. What about Red Dragon? I think it's a phenomenal. It is. It is absolutely phenomenal film, and I think that to be true, to be absolutely truthful about that, so Edward Norton gave a really, really, really good performance in that. It's hard to believe that's 21 years ago, too. I feel old, but yeah, it's 21 years ago. But I love that. I love that movie, and so it works so well too. Um, yeah, and that's. I don't think you could, and I think somebody was asking her. I don't think you could get anybody else to play Lecter. That I mean, it's just. I mean, I know that Matt Mickelson played him in the television series, but for feature films, I don't think there's anybody else. that you could really get to play Hannibal Lecter, because it's one of those roles where, 5, 10 years from now, you go, yeah, it's like somebody else trying to play Han Solo. You can't do it. I mean, I know you had the young, you know, the like the prequel type of thing, but for me, definitely. By the way, Red Dragon was a very very good movie. Do you have a favorite line or catchphrase in a movie or a hated one? Um, the one I can think of off the top of my head, it's not my favorite one, but I just heard it the other day. Is that cost that well, what was it in the running not the running man, RoboCop? I'll buy that for $1, right? And that's a great, you know, that's a great movie in itself, RoboCop. But yeah, I'll buy that for $1. You know, hated one. I don't know. I'd have to come back and think about that one because, you know, I mean, I think the other thing too is when you have all of these catchphrases. Oh, you know what? I'll say this. Even a better one. I'll be back. I know that's so generic, but that. And by the way, the story goes that in 1984, when Arnold was filming The Terminator, okay, with James Cameron, that basically what ended up happening was that actually was not supposed to be the line. He says, "I will be back," and they got into a big tussle about it. And so he actually came across, and they said, so he did it his way, and actually came off, rolled off his tongue, better. And don't forget, guys, 84, not only was that a big year, but Schwarzenegger was just starting to pick up steam. He just did Conan the Barbarian a couple years earlier. Okay. I mean, so the Terminators put him on the map. But yeah, so I would say I'll be back. Hannibal TV series was great. Don't know why it ended premature. Probably because of ratings. If I had to guess right off the top of my head, it was probably ratings. Because there's so much stuff out there right now that it's hard to compete. And you're seeing that a lot of times with a lot of shows is they're not giving it their farewell, season or farewell shows. They're just axing it because at some point you're taking on water, and if you're losing money making the show, it doesn't make any sense. So you've got to just completely, I'll say it's like pulling the band-aid off, ripping the band-aid off, right? You don't like it, but you understand why they did it. So is there a Marvel or DC film that you like that most people didn't, especially critics going back to the 1978 Batman to now? You can choose as many as you like. Okay, let's see. That you like that many people didn't. Hmm. Well, Blade really started it all, didn't it? I mean, I think that um, you know, I would probably say, I mean, this isn't the greatest approach, I mean, so there are a couple of great films that everybody, not everybody, but the majority of people enjoy. Okay, The Avengers is one of them. Okay, um, you know, Star Trek Two, even though that's not really a superhero film, but yeah, I would say um, probably Blade. If I had to think of something like right off the top of my head, I would have to say Blade, because if you look at that time too, in 95, 94, 95, you didn't have a lot of diversity back then with superhero movies and everything else. I mean, the X-Men didn't come out until 6 years after that. So I think there's something to be said there too. I would say Blade. Now the other ones, Blade Trinity one is definitely the quality started to go downhill. So I would probably say Blade. Um, yeah, Blade. I think you're killing me, Swallows. Yeah, I mean, Arnold Schwarzenegger made the best, the most simple line ever. So iconic and so favorite. It's one of my favorite lines of all time, by the way. In 1984, he made Conan the Destroyer. Yes, yes, he did. So Conan the Barbarian was such a success, okay? It was such a success that they ended up making a sequel. They actually ended up making another movie from Conan the Destroyer, and that, of course, was Red Sonja. Bridget Nelson played Red Sonja in that next film, and I think that was '85. But yeah, so they were definitely trying to start something with that. Look, people don't realize there was a very young James Earl Jones in that first movie, and it was good. We look back and go, oh my god, they made what? Yeah. So yeah, it's amazing when you hear these stories that people actually watch these things, and they go, what? Because half, I won't say half, but some of these films, they could never get made, not only because of budget, but because of lines and scripts and everything else. um yes, Blade, when it comes to Marvel, for the most part, yeah. No, I really think, I mean, I'm sure there's more out there I can't think of off the top of my head, but definitely Blade is one of those films that really started. It was a great superhero movie for the time, and yeah, I think that it's interesting when you go back and look at, like, the origins. I mean, Batman, Batman '89 is always a beloved one. Batman Returns was always, I think that's probably, so going back to somebody you had asked, a movie that, um DC film that most people like to do, probably Batman and Robin. I mean, if you really be honest, or Batman Forever, probably Batman Forever. I mean, you had Tommy. Think about this for me. You had Tommy Lee Jones and Jim Carrey. Huh? How? That doesn't make any sense. Red Sonja was '85, alongside with Commando, that was released a few months earlier. Love both of those movies. So here's the thing: in '85, okay, so he had, I think Predator I think Predator was '87, but there was a year, okay, in which Arnold Schwarzenegger had two movies come out, and there was a clause in his contract that said it had to be released within a 6-month period. So the first one got released, okay. I think it was Red Heat. That's what it was. It was Red Heat. So Commando came out, okay, and then Red Heat came out, but it was one of those things where it was like 6 or 8 months apart because they didn't want to be, and that was in his contract. And it was just amazing to see, you know, there are crazy things in everybody's contract, but it's interesting to see how that was back then, especially. I mean, it's crazy to think today that Schwarzenegger is now 75 years old. They just re-upped him for Fubar, second season of Fubar. Today is also Peter Weller's birthday. He turned 76. So I wanted to ask you, what's your opinion on the RoboCop sequels, the remake, and live in the animated? Okay, so first of all, happy birthday to Mr. Peter Weller. He is a fantastic actor. Of course, made his appearance in RoboCop. I love the original. So you look at that director, okay, Paul Verhoeven, I believe his name is. I butchered his last name. But he had a run of almost 3 or 4 movies in 6 or 7 years. Okay, that were just incredible. Okay, he did RoboCop. Okay, then he did Total Recall. Yes, he was the same one that did Basic Instinct. He was going outside of his element. And yes, he did Showgirls. Okay, but Weller, what Robo? So the sequels are crap. I haven't seen RoboCop 2 or 3. Crap, because they were trying to recreate the element and everything else. The remake I have not seen either, because when I saw they were coming on with that, I said, no, I don't want any part of that. I didn't even know they had an animated show, so that's breaking news to me. But the interesting thing about RoboCop is this. The main theme of that film, okay, was man versus machine, life or death. Because if you look at, they didn't have to put him back together. They were trying to build the perfect cop, okay? And as, he gets more and more, as Murphy's memory was starting to come back, he was starting to see images, getting addresses, and he was starting to live his own life. And there's that scene at the end where, you see that the top of his helmet get broken, and then you see part of his eye. And that was really supposed to basically express he's still human, even though the back of him is, it was a robot per se. Um, One of his, it wasn't a big part, okay, but I loved him into was Star Trek Into Darkness. It was a small little part, but he was really good in it. And yeah, so Peter Weller, I mean, that's what he's most known for. He's done a lot of other stuff, but RoboCop is a, and I think that's a film that really couldn't get made today. It just couldn't. Or if it did, it would be a lot. I mean, look, they tried the remake and it totally busted. So that just tells you everything you need to know. Red Heat was released. Okay. Wow. 35. Excuse me. 88 was a big year too. 88 was a big year. I didn't realize that. Okay. I thought that was earlier. Okay. Personally, I loved RoboCop 3. I think it was very fun. RoboCop 2 is good, but it leaned way too much on comedy. And as for the remake, I loved it. Personally, way too. And that's what it should. That's what it should. Okay, because that is the major element in um in that film is man versus machine, right? Um when you start to do too much comedy, it takes away the serious nature of it. I'm not saying it's got to be Academy Award winning serious, but it has to be serious enough that you believe it. And there has to be stakes. I, I go back to that thing that I did, a couple of years ago. Remakes, reboots, and sequels are three things that drive Hollywood. And, MGM is now going back to revisit some of these old IPs. And I wouldn't be shocked if you saw a Robocop type of series in the next 5 years. you know no, and as far as the human element, I think that's important because that's what makes it, right? That's why it's RoboCop. He's part human and part machine. So definitely Peter Well. Oh, I forgot he was in Dexter. Was he in the new um I watched the first couple episodes of New Blood. I didn't finish it. Was he in the new series? Because I've seen all of the old episodes, all the ones on Showtime, and I don't ever remember him being in that one. Now, I know John Lithgow was in season 4, but I don't remember him being in the later seasons. So that he's probably in the newer ones. He was amazing as the voice of Batman: The Dark Knight Returns Part One. Oh, okay. That once again didn't know that. I mean that's pretty cool. I mean everybody thinks of Peter Conroy or Kevin Conroy as Batman, but yeah, I mean look, it's those animated stuff. It's pretty good. I mean, he was in the second to last. Okay, okay, yeah, yeah. No, I didn't pick up on that, but yeah, it's one of those things where I think that, and this is why talking about actors and getting up there in age. I mean, this is why I keep saying, you know, Tom Cruise, and I'm not going to go off on a tangent about, but Tom Cruise is the last movie star we have. I mean, when you look at all the stars that we have, I mean, Tom Hanks, Denzel Washington, Tom Cruise, Michael Douglas, they're all getting up there in age. And we need to start appreciating them more for who they are and what they do. I'm hoping that RoboCop does return someday. I believe Amazon is trying to do something on TV. Yeah, I heard something about that on streaming, and I'm hoping that the RoboCop Returns sequel has been in development hell for years. Yeah, it has to be the right story, though, Antonius. That's the key thing. It has to be the right story. If it's the right story, and you say, well, how many stories can they tell with RoboCop? I understand. But the thing is, it has to be the right story. So maybe it's why he got into being a cop. Okay. Um, Maybe you tell a story that, look, maybe he's in his 20s. Okay. And, there's an assault. Okay. And he vows that he's never going to be a victim again. So he goes to join the force. And then the season walks you through him going through the force. And at the end of it, he becomes a cop. So season two, you might have him become. I mean, that's just a total hypothetical, but that's the thing. And there are certain roles too that are known for um, the actors, like Peter Weather. You just talking about, known for RoboCop. I mean, Carl Weathers. He's known for one major role, and that was Apollo Creed. Sylvester Stallone, Rocky Balboa. So I think you could tell his story, but it has to be much further back, like I said, in the mid-20s type of thing. What was the first movie you saw as a kid? Or is there a movie that made you say, this is why I love cinema? Maybe it's a video rental, going to the movies. Okay, so I remember, this is going to date me, but and I don't remember seeing it, but I do remember being there. I was 2 when my grandmother took me to see Star Wars. Now, I don't really remember it, but I remember being in the front row and everything else. So, um, as far as this is why I love cinema. So, truth be told, when I was 19, and I think I've told this story before, when I was 19, I was in a film class. Okay. And in this film class, it wasn't we were just watching movies, although that was the crux of it, the main crux of it. It was basically breaking down the movies, the themes of the movies, why the filmmaker did what they did. I saw, and that gave me my appreciation for film today. So in this class, I saw films like The Godfather. I saw One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I saw, you know, at the time, Shawshank Redemption. Okay. I saw, um, I saw plenty of other movies. And that was when Star Wars, and that was when I said, yeah, I love movies. That was it. That being said, growing up in my 20s, going to see, films with my mom, that was fun. Um, and as I grew older, my passion for the movies and everything else, I said, it would be really cool to be able to do this. Okay. Be in the business. And I said, okay. And, I actually have a spec script that's based off of my own life. Okay. It's actually structured, believe it or not, structured like Dexter's, with me being the main character, and then, professional and personal and relationships and everything else. Um, so yeah. And then being able to actually try to make shorts in my film class in college, okay, knowing what a boom operator was, casting, music, editing, doing all these things, it really, this is, and going back, this is why Tom Cruise is so damn good, because he knows everybody else's job. He knows about film editing, he knows about sound, he knows about, you know, all these different types of shots and everything else. So, but yeah, and going to the movies, one movie that really resonated with me, and I've been playing the game for 25 plus years, is Rounders. So it's a little movie, if you're not familiar with it, it's 1997 or 98. It's a monster cast, okay? Matt Damon, Edward Norton, John Turturro. Um, just it just goes on and on and on. John Malkovich, and it's having to do with poker and everything else. And that's the one movie that really, was a big, big influence in my life. Actually, started me playing the game of poker. I always hope that those classic franchises return in some capacity or form. It's why I got so excited for the last two Terminator films, the last Rambo, Creed, and even Indiana Jones this year. So I believe that, and yeah, I agree with you. Okay. And look, if it's done right, it's fantastic. Okay. The problem is that when you start to shoehorn trademark characters in there, what I mean by trademark characters is like Arnold Schwarzenegger in Dark Fate, or Sylvester Stallone in Rambo, or well, I mean he's the star, but Sylvester Stallone Creed or Indiana Jones, or it doesn't hold the same weight because you can have a great story and have really crummy actors, and they can only do so much with it. And then you can have the best story in the world at crummy actors, and the story will be good. The story will be good. So, and the other thing is, partially too, it depends on if the rights run out. I mean, take a look at that last Fantastic Four movie. That was an unmitigated disaster. But Fox had made that because the rights were running out, so they could keep the rights. And so when you have Terminator movies like that and you spread them out, interest dies. That's why, in a couple of years, I mean, we'll see what happens with the new Avatar, and they're going to have to print money for it. But Avatar's not going to finish until 2031. People are going to have to, they're going to have to, Disney's going to have to do something to keep the interest between Avatar 4, which is coming out in 2028, and Avatar 5 in 2031. And yeah, Indiana Jones is another one of those franchises that I think there are some people out there that would have just liked them to. I mean, he wrote off the sunset. It's the way you want to end. But sometimes, you know, I mean, it's all a matter of that is one of those films that you can't, unless you have Harrison Ford, you can't bring him back. And that's why he said this is his last film. Now, on the flip side of the coin, it's something like when you're talking about something like a James Bond, okay, where you can just plug and play people, that's something completely different. But I understand what you mean. What is your favorite movie experience? For me, it's definitely Terminator Genesis because I finally fulfilled a dream, but also Endgame because yeah, I think I think I'm in one of the majority crowds when I think it's Endgame. I I I I mean I went back, so that first time seeing Endgame, and this is why the theatrical experience, and Tom Cruise is all for that and everything else. You can watch. You have the best sound system in the world in your home. It's not the same thing. It's just not the same thing. Um, but I mean, you can even go, YouTube this today, and still there are magical moments when it comes to cinema. Anyone, I mean, whether it's going all the way back to Casablanca or The Godfather or whatever it is, there are magical moments, and I still remember how loud that theater got when that hammer lifted up. And, you know, it's incredible. So the other one I would say too is No Way Home. Like everybody knew the leaks. They had heard of, Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire coming back. But when they came on screen, that applause was pretty ruckus. I mean, it was loud because it was the first time that, oh my God, they're really doing this, and it was a realization. It wasn't just hyperbole at that point. Is there a movie or franchise that is untouchable in your mind? Oh, I think it has to be The Godfather. I think it has to be The Godfather. Um, it's either The Godfather or Scarface. Those are the two movies. I mean, I always swore that, The Exorcist too, but of course they're remaking that. But I think it has to be those two films. Because when you look at The Godfather, that was an epic. Okay. First of all, you had the cast. Okay. You're never going to assemble that same cast again. Al Pacino, Diane Keaton, Robert Duvall. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on. Then you had the story. And Mario Puzo's, I haven't read it, but it's a thick, thick book. Okay. Um, but the story in itself, it was so encompassing. And the other thing I think too is it was really the first mobster movie. I mean, look, there had been other mobster movies, okay? Um, going all the way back. I mean, people don't realize this. Before 1983, okay, Scarface was remade. There was an original Scarface. But beyond that, this was the first movie that not only told a story, not only gave fantastic cast, but I think it was the first mobster movie that people really made. I mean, and the other thing I'll say is this: Coppola is one of the on the Mount Rushmore, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, there were four people that have changed cinema. Hitchcock did, but there were four people that changed cinema. Okay, George Lucas for his special effects in Star Wars, Francis Ford Coppola, okay, for The Godfather, Steven Spielberg, and Martin Scorsese. Those four men single-handedly changed cinema. And when you go back and you watch The Godfather, it's just an amazing experience. And I actually tried years and years and years ago to watch all three as a marathon. And that's why I won't watch it on AMC, because they butcher it. That all being said, I think that it's a phenomenal movie. So to answer your question, I would say the Scarface and because look, we don't get movies like The Untouchables, like The Departed, like Casino, like Goodfellas without The Godfather. You don't. So I would, to answer your question, Dad, I would say this: it's either going to be The Godfather or Scarface. It amazes me sometimes how younger. It amazes me sometimes how younger than most people that I get excited for stuff I don't get to see in theaters. But I grew up with through VHS, DVDs, and television. I just feel like no, it is, and I don't know how old you are, Antonius, but I'm the same way. So I remember the DVD. I remember. So my very first DVD that I ever got was Any Given Sunday, back in 1999. That was the very first DVD I ever got. I remember those days of VHS with the cassettes. I remember going to Hollywood Video to rent videos. I remember going to Blockbuster and their new releases and everything else. And this is years before they did any sort of membership type of thing. Okay? It's one of those things where in television, we have gotten away from what I call quote appointment television. Okay? That is that one thing that if you go back to the 90s, it's a perfect example. Okay. The 90s were an era where there was appointment television all the time, whether it was NYPD Blue that changed the game. I mean, Thursday nights, okay, Thursday nights, that was everybody's A game. Okay. You had ER, you had Friends on Thursdays. Then CSI was on, okay? And then you had, all of these other shows. That's appointment television. That's great television. Today, there's nothing on because there's 500 different channels, okay? I mean, whether it's the travel channel or, the cooking channel or whatever it is, everybody's everybody's attention spans are gone. That's why something like TikTok is so big, because people don't have to focus that long. YouTube videos, okay? Take YouTube videos, okay? Your average YouTube video is probably in between 5 to 7 to 9 minutes because people can't hold their attention spans that long, okay? That's why I won't say it, but that's why they have a hard time watching feature films, okay? Because let's face it, in their homes, okay, they can hit the pause button and not worry about it. They can get up and go get something to eat and come back and everything else, okay? And everything is done through the phone, okay? So it's not like it's not that bad. No, I remember those days. I remember those days. And, you know, I mean, we've gotten there's so much content out there that it's what do you choose? This is why when I started this channel, I decided to focus primarily on movies. I mean, yeah, we talk about, I talk about streaming and television and everything, but primarily 9 out of 10 stories are about movies because I can only do one thing. So I totally understand where you're coming from on that. I want to see arachnophobia in theaters and brought fake spiders with me and threw them in a scare scene. That's awesome. But to your point though, that's great by the way. That's John Goodman, one of John Goodman's best. But to the thing is, like, people don't go to the theaters like they used to either. Like, this is one of those rare occasions where everybody's going to the movies all the time. I mean, but yeah, I mean, especially with streaming out there. But no, that's hilarious. I mean, and that's fun too, to get a kick out of everything. I grew up with Schwarzenegger, Stallone, Lundgren, and Van Damme films, and I remember renting the classic Batman films again and again. People could say whatever they want, but Forever was a big hit in '95. No, it was. It was a huge hit back in '95. And it's interesting. I grew up with those same people. And when you put them in, so going back to one thing that The Expendables is one of those films. It's Sylvester Stallone said it nearly killed him, literally killed him. But the thing is, he got all of the best action stars together. And this is, I keep bringing his name up, but Tom Cruise. There are no action heroes anymore. Back then, you had Stallone, you had Schwarzenegger, you had Lundgren. I mean, people forget the unmitigated disaster that was Masters of the Universe. Okay, it's awesome, you know. And Van Damme, you had Hard Target, you had Bloodsport, you had all these things, and martial arts was still coming into play. Okay, Chuck Norris was huge. I mean, I remember, whether it's Lone Wolf McQuaid or Code of Silence or Invasion USA, the Delta Force, he was kicking ass. Van Damme was right there too. Yeah, I mean, Van Damme for the money's worth, that Street Fighter. I love Street Fighter, But all that being said, I remember those days, and those days are gone. And Batman Forever is awesome. It's awesome. And one thing that we lose touch of is, and this is why that whole thing with Zaslav's a big thing. Now, obviously, it's 30 years ago, but film. This is what inspires other people. This is what inspires other people to go make movies. Art films like Casablanca or The Godfather or The Deer Hunter, or pick whatever film you want. Okay, Apocalypse Now. Okay, yeah, and that's the thing. Like, Batman Forever was a big deal because it was a brand new Batman. So I remember that. Also, speaking about Godfather, I know I'm probably in the minority, but I love Godfather 3. I love Godfather 3. I wanted to go see that as a kid, and I never stayed in the theater. But I want to sit down and rewatch it. This is one of the good. I mean, think about the cast too. So actually, Sofia Coppola's in that. His daughter is in that. Okay? Um, but you had Al Pacino come back. You had Diane Keaton come back. And it was the closure of the story. That's what made it so good. And it was nominated for 8 Academy Awards. Now, it didn't win any, but still. I mean, Coppola, one of his most underrated films, in my opinion, is Dracula. Bram Stoker's Dracula. I was just watching that the other day. Okay? Keanu Reeves, Winona Ryder, Anthony Hopkins. I mean, just unbelievable. That was 92, actually. There was a rumored Godfather 4 with Leonardo DiCaprio starting. So I think what they're going to do, Dad, is I think they're going to remake it. I think they're going to remake it. They wouldn't piggyback off that last one, but I think they will. Because I remember hearing about that, and I think what they would do is remake The Godfather. Now I don't know who they would get for a cast, but I mean, hell, even Robert De Niro. You know, um, So I. But what I'll say, here's what I'll say about this. I think if you're going to do that, you need to do it linear this time. So the first time obviously everybody's seen Godfather and Godfather 2. The first film was all about at that time. The second film, it jumped back and forth, right? So it went from the present day to Vito, and obviously played by Robert De Niro, and then back and forth and back and forth. Here, and there would be a lot of backlash. A, I don't know where you get funding, and B, I don't know if Coppola would let it get made. But beyond that, I think you have to do it linear. I think that would be the way to go, because if you just did the same thing over, it's not going to make the same impact. So I have heard those rumors. One film that I have a very unique love toward, and I watch every Christmas, is Jack Frost with Michael Keaton. Such a beautiful and touching movie. It was released on 1998, the year I was born. That's awesome. That's awesome. And that's the thing. When you have a great actor like that, I know I was talking about like Spotlight before, but when you have an actor like that, that's the impressive thing. Like, his range spans everything from a kids, I won't say a kids movie, but like a Jack Black or Jack Frost, okay, to a Beetlejuice. People forget, like, Mr. Mom, okay. He did Clean and Sober, okay. Then he goes off and he does, and it does Batman. He did only 2 Batmans. But that's the thing. Like, he was really out of the zeitgeist of society for a long time. And then Birdman. And Birdman comes in. He does a phenomenal job in that. And then he gets a ton of other. The Founder. It's one of his best movies. Okay. Of course, he's in Spider Man Homecoming. He does Spotlight. So he's an incredible actor. He really is. That's awesome, though, that you have a connection to that. And that's why I always say, the other thing I'll say is this. This is why I always say films are memories, right? Films are emotional touchstones to who you are. Because you remember the first time that you saw whatever film it was, wherever it was, with whomever it was, and it's important to you, even though it may not be important to others. But when you talk about it, you have that same appreciation and you have that same love. That's awesome, though. The first movie I went to see in theaters was Chicken Run. And I remember the watching the first Harry Potter film and was freaking out because of the whole Voldemort thing and had to leave the theater. No, I mean, I remember my buddy took me to go see. I mean, I still remember Ray. So my buddy, we don't talk anymore, but he used to work for Panavision and he used to be a camera loader. And so this is when this is back in 2004. And God, I can't believe it's almost 20 years ago. But nonetheless, he's like, look, we just finished this movie. You want to come down and watch it? I'm like, yeah, of course. And at the time, nobody really knew what Jamie Foxx was. And I went to Panavision in one of their screening rooms and actually watched Ray. And that was incredible. I mean, obviously won the Oscar that. It was incredible. That same year, okay, he ended up doing Collateral with Tom Cruise. Okay? he would have been the only man ever to win 2 Oscars for 2 different roles on the same night. He didn't end up winning for Collateral, but amazing nonetheless. Um, but yeah, whether it's the Avengers or, for me, Rounders or Star Wars, but that's the thing. Harry Potter. We went to go see Prisoner of Azkaban. It was myself, it was Kirk, it was his sister and a couple other people. So you remember what you were doing, where you were, and who you went with. So for me, it took years to get back in the Harry Potter franchise because of that. Of course, today it's laughable. No, it is. And it's going to be interesting to see what they do with this new series and how they're going to do it. Because there was a lot of backlash. There was a lot of backlash when they said, we're going to bring Harry Potter. Like, what? Really? Because the biggest thing that major fans are afraid of is they're going to tarnish it. Because they love the old films, whether it's Chamber of Secrets or Prisoner of Azkaban or Deathly Hallows. They don't want to see those tarnished. And those films are always going to be there. They're doing this for the next generation. So we'll see what happens with that. So Franklin Zero's, yeah. No, I'm telling you, Masters of the Universe, and somebody was saying it earlier, I think it was you, Antonius, about being in development hell. Yeah, no, he was epic as Skeletor. The makeup and everything else. He said, by the way, he regretted doing that role many years later. But that is a movie that has been trying to get made for years. There is a whole 1 hour documentary on Greystone. Grayskull. It's called Grayskull. They had a whole script. They were about that close away from shooting, and it fell through. I mean, it was about a month before they were supposed to go shoot. And can you imagine what it'd be today with all the CGI and the effects and everything else? It would be. I'm not gonna lie, it was pretty cool. The Universal Soldier movies were amazing, especially 3 and 4. Got philosophical and kind of dark and scary during the ending. Good stuff, in my opinion. I've not seen the other ones. I remember. I think I've seen 2. I've definitely seen the first one though, and that was interesting. And once again, that was right around the time too, where you had like futuristic movies, like you had Demolition Man, you had all these other films. So yeah, remaking The Godfather would be a huge mistake in my opinion. Finding another Al Pacino, Marlon Brando, and Robert De Niro is just no, you can't. You can't. That's why it's so iconic. You can't replace those guys. And this is why I'm doing the whole Perfect Movie series. Because there's not a thing wrong with these movies. I mean, mind you, I always say this film is subjective or anything, but that being said, you can't replace them. Ian, how do you I don't care how many years it's been. How do you follow in their footsteps? Like, one of the most classic scenes in The Godfather is when Michael is talking with his brother Sonny and everything else, and Sonny says, "Oh, you're just taking it, personally, this, and this." And so you see Michael start to really walk through the plan. And he said, "Well, what if I can get it?" And the camera slowly pushes in and pushes in and pushes in. And this is when we start to see the Michael that's a devious, methodical, planning guy. And he pushes in, and he's like, at the very end, it's one shot. The camera's just slowly manipulating. It's like, and then I'll shoot him. And it's like, oh. And that's the transformation. From that point on, Michael goes being this innocent bystander to this apprentice, if you will, for the Godfather. So, and that goes back to the scene in the second film too, when, the whole Mo Green thing. And he says, his brother says, you don't come to Las Vegas and talk to a man like well, green like that. He says, Sonny, or he doesn't say Sonny, he's like, Fredo, you're my brother and I love you, but don't ever take sides against the family again. Ever. And then after that, you have that scene where once again Michael's looking out into the rain and he says, Fredo, you're my brother and everything else, but you're nothing to me now. You're not a friend. You're not a brother. When you visit our mother, I want to know a day in advance so I won't be there. I don't want you hanging around the hotels. I don't want to know you. But that just goes to show you how methodical he went. So to replace them, you couldn't do it. And I mean, I've always said, personally speaking, that anything on the top 100 list should never be touched. Ever. There should never be, you want to piggyback off something, okay, fine, whatever. But you should never, ever remake those movies. Good luck trying to make Casablanca. And they'll try to do it. Mark my words. Somebody will try and remake Casablanca. Citizen Kane. Citizen Kane will never get remade. One hopes. But then again, we've said that about plenty of other things, right? Keaton was even amazing in Toy Story 3 and Cars is his range. And yeah, and he can do voice acting too. So it doesn't matter. People don't realize this, not that I've ever done it. People don't realize voice acting is some of the hardest work out there because it's not like you're acting and it's physical and everything else. You're using your voice. And you have lines to read, and whether you like the man or you don't like the man, Vin Diesel did a fantastic job as Groot because for all of the years in all of the 3 films, he only had 3 words. I am Groot until the very end of the last one. And he had to use his voice to show emotion. I mean, hell, even Bradley Cooper could voice however he wanted, but it was dialogue. So voice acting is extremely difficult. That's why we fell in love with Woody and Buzz, because of their voices. Best and worst movie couple. Favorite movie adaptation from a book. Okay. Favorite movie adaptation from a book, I think Silence of the Lambs. I think that's goes without saying. Worst movie couple? So best movie couple, I would probably go with either Meg Ryan and Billy Crystal in When Harry Met Sally, or Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan in Sleepless in Seattle, or You've Got Mail. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure. I think probably one of the worst. I mean, I may catch flack for this. Twilight. I think it was one of the worst. And Patterson, this is why Patterson went off and did indie movies for a long, long time, because he didn't want to be known as that guy, and that's why Kristen Stewart went off and did indie movies, smaller movies for all those, because they didn't want to be known. For so many years after those movies, they were known as the Twilight couple. I mean, of course, Patterson just starred in the Batman, and Stewart just. One film I love Kristen Stewart in, though, was that new Charlie and the Angels movies. Loved her in that. But I would say the other. So there's another good couple that I don't think it really gets talked about. I mean, obviously you've got Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman and Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton. But I think for me, even in the last like 20 years, I think it's going to be Bradley Cooper and Jennifer Lawrence. They weren't a couple per se, but their chemistry. And by the way, they did play a couple in Serena, but those two are magical together. They dominated the whole 2010. So that would probably be that. A lot of actors, regret films and stuff, but I gotta say some of the movies are actually great, such as The Incredible Hulk, Red Sonja, Daredevils, Masters of the Universe, which you mentioned. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. The Incredible Hulk, you gotta remember. So The Incredible Hulk is I mean, it doesn't get, it's really not fleshed out. It's always fleshed out of the MCU, but Eric Bana didn't do, and Edward Norton, they didn't do a bad job. So The Incredible Hulk is the one with Edward Norton. That isn't a bad movie. And Ang Lee is, I mean, don't forget, guys, he just was coming off doing Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon too. It wasn't bad. It wasn't horrible, horrible, but there was a lot of things wrong with it. Red Sonja, remember that was in the 1980s, so I mean, it was kind of like anything goes at this point, you know, um, with design and everything else. Masters of the Universe is a classic. I'm sorry, I grew up. Now this is going to date me, but I remember this. I remember having all the action figures, like Grayskull and He-Man and Man at Arms and Ram Man and Skeletor and Beast Man and Trapjaw. I remember those days. I had all of those toys. Yeah, no, and that's the thing. Like they look back, so I mean, they're almost like cult Daredevil too. I mean, with the whole Ben Affleck thing, you know. Um, but it's like one of those things where the movie, it's almost like they're cult classics. That's what it comes down to. They're cult classics. Um, yeah. And I mean, for me, like one of those other films that you didn't name, but I'm sure you'd enjoy, it's The Devil's Advocate. I love The Devil's Advocate. That's a great cult classic movie. Okay. Keanu Reeves. By the way, cast is huge. Keanu Reeves, Charlize Theron, Al Pacino. Um, I'm blanking on the guy that played Coach. He played the coach in the I'm blanking on his name. He starred in this television series Coach. Okay, I mean it just had a big cast, and then when you saw the twist there at the end, you're like, and that is one of the most epic rants in the last 15 minutes is top notch. But I totally 100% agree with you on that, Antonius. Vin Diesel's best performance is still the Iron Giant, in my opinion. That film has got a lot of great messages and is my favorite animated film of all time. It definitely helps with the group. Definitely. And that's when you're doing things like that. So one of the underrated Spielberg movies, if you will, is Ready Player One, right? With Miles Teller and but yeah, I mean, so there were so many references, 80s references in that movie that they actually had to remove some, and the Iron Giant was one of those references. Um, but yeah, and I love it. I hope. I mean, I think the book's out there. I don't know if they're trying to develop it. I would love to see a Ready Player Two. I think that would be awesome. But yeah, I definitely think that for what it's worth, it definitely helped him for that. So also, I gotta say, it's probably controversial for some, but I love Twilight personally, and having seen Eclipse and Breaking Dawn Part Two theaters, it's a great theater. No, and that's cool. It's not controversial. I think the problem is this. And by the way, I'm really glad you enjoyed it in theaters because you should have. Um, the problem is they were so young, right? They were 17, 18 years old, and they were probably younger than that when they first started, but they played these roles for years, and it was one of those couples where Bella and you know it's one of those things where, I mean, look, it really started the whole craze. I mean, because when I was talking about Blade earlier, right? I mean, Blade was a vampire movie, but it was a darker movie. But think of all the vampire type of. I mean, look, you had Interview with the Vampire. You had all these movies come out. I mean, Anne Rice's. that were about, you know, vampires and that whole supernatural thing. I mean, hell, we got a whole supernatural television series for 15 years. So, yeah, no, Twilight, it's one of those franchises that really helped not only those two actors, but everybody else. And they had a lot of other cool actors in it, too. I think I think you shouldn't feel bad for liking something that others don't, and I love romantic films. I don't see why people uh I don't see why people see them as films for girls plus love them. No, look, I love romantic comedies. I love romantic comedies. I love romantic films. Okay? A movie that I really cried when I went to go see was City of Angels. I mean, that's you want to talk about a tearjerker, okay? But no, absolutely. I love rom coms. I love everything else. But and you shouldn't feel bad. But here's the thing. Unfortunately, in today's model, they're not. We don't see them anymore. We don't see them anymore, and that's sad. Because 20 years ago, I wouldn't say it was littered with them, but you saw quite a few more of them. And you know, so I think that that's a shame. But I think we'll get back to that point. It's just going to take time. You know, but we'll see. I mean, if nothing else, you're gonna get raunchy comedies like an American Pie, like a No Hard Feelings, like anything else. So they'll make the comeback. It's just gonna take time. Craig T. Nelson, thank you, Dad. I knew the guy's. It's one of those things where it's called tip of the tongue syndrome. You know his name, you see his face, but you can't think of him. Thank you very much. It's Craig T. Nelson. Devil's Advocate is an amazing movie too. Al Pacino did amazing as the devil in that one, though his transformation was a bit weak. I think End of Days has the best design in its turn look. Yeah, no. Well, I think that was the thing, right? I agree with you. I agree with you on the look. No, that whole I don't. But see, to your point though, Antonius, I don't think they were really going for transformation, right? They were going for more of the human element and everything else. But the last 15 minutes of that movie is just epic, epic, epic. But it's a cult classic. And that's the key thing that you got to keep in mind. Love Kristen Stewart in Panic Room, The Messengers, Zaretha, Snow White and the Huntsman, and many more. Her indie work is amazing too, in my opinion, as well as Patterson. Yeah, absolutely. And this is why they had to gain their fame back by doing it. A movie that I want to sit down and watch that I it's on my to watch list is Diana. I want to see Diana because that is like one of those roles you go, oh wow, she actually got nominated for Best Actress. So I can't wait to see that. But yeah, and now she's able to come out and do bigger and better roles, and so it'll be interesting to see what happens with Patterson. I think he's gonna in this new Batman movie coming out next October. Okay, I think what you're gonna see is a whole lot of more Bruce Wayne. I think they're going to flip the script on this. I think Matt Reeves is going to flip the script, so to speak. So you have um, a lot of Batman, but not so much of, or a lot of Bruce Wayne, not so much Batman. Because the thing is, the Batman was 3 hours long, and we got maybe 5 scenes with Robert Pattinson playing Bruce Wayne. Okay, we got, you know, the funeral scene. We got the scene at that whole funeral scene, the scene with Alfred a couple times in the back cave and everything else. So this is going to be a heavy dose of Bruce Wayne. You're going to see Batman, but I think Matt Reeves also wants to set up a trilogy to where it's going to be a big finale. So I remember seeing Cosmo, Cosmo, Cosmopolitan in theaters in that film. And I got to say, I love that movie, but it was an awkward ending seeing people screaming. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, it's one of those films where if it's a film that you go, What do they just do? I haven't seen it, but it's like Bo is Afraid. Like I said, I haven't seen it, but everybody who says that movie is messed up. So, I mean, and eventually they just, and as long as you enjoy the movie, that's the only thing that matters, right? But, and usually they just fall away to the onset. So, some movies have a bigger message behind them, and you need to give them time to tell the story. I have cried in pretty much everything at this point except romantic films. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, and that one thing movies are supposed to do is invoke emotion. Some films are supposed to make you uncomfortable, like a Schindler's List. I mean, I think it's Spielberg's masterclass, but it evokes, it's uncomfortable. I mean, it talks about one of the worst atrocities that's happened in the last 50 years. Okay? But it was done well. One of the most powerful shots in that movie is that girl standing there in that red dress and it's all black and white. And by the way, Behind the Artist, okay, I think it was 2012. That was the last film to win in black and white. Okay? Some art is meant to evoke uncomfortable feelings. Okay? Like a Schindler's List, like a Spotlight, like all these films, but they're meant to tell a story. Some are meant to invoke emotion. Okay? You care about the characters so deeply that, I mean, for me, I remember the last film I cried in was Tick Tick Boom. And guys, if you haven't seen Tick Tick Boom, go watch it. It's it's a musical, but it's Andrew Garfield. If Will Smith didn't win the Oscar a couple years ago, I think Andrew would have. But it's an amazing. I bawled my eyes out watching that movie. Unbelievable. But that's the thing. It's supposed to invoke emotion, whether it's happiness, whether it's sadness, whether it's anger, whether it's frustration, whatever it is. And that, as long as it's able to do that, and that's the thing about comedies too. Comedy is all about timing because what you may find funny, I may not, and vice versa. It's about timing. Can you hit those notes and do something? And it's all about polar opposites. So, no, that's cool. You have your YouTube series featuring the perfect movie. Is there an imperfect film that you'd fix and makes perfect? Um, hmm. Let me think. I don't know. That's a good question. I think that, is there an imperfect film? I think there are films that, you know what? I don't know. I'll be. I had not thought of that. I don't know if there's an imperfect film. It's one of those things. So obviously, you know what I always say is film is subjective. Um, okay, the one thing I could say, and I don't know if it would make it perfect. Okay, the one imperfect film I would struggle to make perfect would be No Time to Die because I didn't believe that whole third act. I didn't believe and I'm not going to give it away in case you guys haven't seen it, but I didn't believe that for a minute. I didn't believe it for a minute. I didn't buy it, and it didn't work for me. And so, as far as fixing an imperfect film, now I would say that. I mean, so, but then again, that goes a long way. Like that, there were a lot of things. I mean, one of the major things about that film too was you didn't see the villain until the third act. Like, first of all, Raleigh Malik. The only reason why they got Raleigh Malik is because he won the Oscar the year before for No Time to or Bohemian Rhapsody a couple years before. If you look at every single Bond movie that Daniel Craig did, okay, whether it was Le Chiffre in Casino Royale, whether it was Green in Quantum of Solace, whether it's Silva in um, Skyfall, whether it's the villain in Spectre. Okay, the thing about that was, okay, that you all saw that at some point during the middle of the film, okay, you had the introduction to the villain. So, for example, in Casino Royale, right when they're about ready to start the poker game, we're introduced to the villain, okay, where our hero meets the villain. In Quantum of Solace, which by the way isn't a good movie, but there are some great shots, okay, Bond is introduced to Green in the opera, not in the opera, but when it comes down, that's a phenomenal shot. Okay, you see his eyes, you see the backdrop, you see the tuxedos. So there, Silva making that unbelievable soliloquy, walking toward him, almost 7 minutes. Okay, even there, um, we're introduced to him in Rome. Okay, with Christoph Waltz, and that's a brilliant scene. No Time to Die didn't work at all for me. Number one, it was too long. Number two, I didn't believe it. And number three, the problem with that film was it was tried to be linear, and it didn't work at all. So, to answer your question, Dad, I would say this: I would try to fix No Time to Die, but definitely don't think it would be perfect. Spencer, the Diana film. Thank you. That was the name of the film I was thinking of. It's a phenomenal film that tells a fictional story through Diana's head. Brilliant movie and director. He also directed Kristen, an exceptional film, Personal Shopper. That was the name of the film. That was the name of the film. Spencer. I'm absolutely looking forward to seeing that. Definitely. The first emotional moment I remember seeing for the first time in my life is Terminator 2 when Arnold chooses to sacrifice himself. Seeing that as a kid, it can, oh my gosh. Oh, talk about, oh, that's brutal. But that just goes to show you something about what Cameron did. He made this imperfect thing, he tried to make it human, right? He tried to make it have feelings. And so he uses that. And that, oh, I can't even imagine. But that's how James Cameron is probably that fourth guy on the Mount Rushmore because number one, he does sequels so well. Number two, he's moved the needle, okay, as far as production design and everything else with Titanic, okay, back in 97, Avatar in '08, here in, 2022. So he's moved the needle that way. Number three, strong female leads, whether it's Linda Hamilton as, you know, um, John Connor's mother, or whether it's, Kate Winslet in Titanic, or, hell, even Sigourney Weaver, okay, in Aliens. So he's really, but yeah, I can only imagine how busted up you must have been for that. T2 left me with such an impression that I quickly went to the next day and watched Terminator 1 and 3, and it made me change where, wow. And that's powerful. And that's what films are supposed to do. If they can make you change the way you view your life, you've done your job. That filmmaker has done their job. That's awesome. That's why owning physical media is so important. I agree with you wholeheartedly. With society being so soft now, movies are changed due to the original content. Another reason why TMC needs to stay. No, wholeheartedly, 100% agree with you. Before I, started this, before when I had a job, I was going out and buying the brand new release. I have like 5 or 6 boxes in storage of movies, of Blu-rays. And I buy the Blu-rays because it has all the additional features. Okay. Yeah, it's got the little featurettes, it's got the trailers, it's got the spots, but that's where the money is. That's where the money is. And I totally agree with you. Because with everything being on digital now, you know, it's not the same thing. You can own something, like I own Transformers, okay? But it's on digital. I haven't watched that movie in years, literally years. So I totally understand that. And TCM needs to stay because this is what up and coming and aspiring filmmakers view. Like, do the right thing. I mean, come on. That's a phenomenal movie for people that haven't seen. Oh, yeah, you need to see that one. Um, it's what I loved about No Time to Die is how it showcases that even someone I like James Bond, can leave a story. And yeah, there were a lot of things behind that, such as contract and everything else. But yeah, I mean, like what you were just talking about with T2, with self-sacrifice, you know, and that the hero's journey. So they needed to bring him to an end. It's why I love the Flash too. What it did with Batman, it was extremely emotional. Some characters you never expect uh, such closure. I think it's kind of what closes an actor's time as well. If done right, no, definitely, definitely, and it has to be done right, even for a couple of scenes. If you're going to bring them back, give them a couple of good scenes and shut it down. I totally agree with you wholeheartedly because this is why story is so important. So I remember renting Terminator 3 countless times to the point where the person asked me again. This is what movies should do: evoking emotion, love, and just passion. And I was, yeah, and that's, you're right. So whether it's makes you happy and joyous and you find love in it, whether it makes you sad, okay, and you cry, whether it makes you angry that something happens, okay, or whether it makes you uncomfortable, something like a spotlight or a Schindler's List, okay, or there's another thing to it, or it inspires you so much that you want to go out and make something yourself about it. So, for example, I don't know, something that's going on in society that is not happening, but you know about it and you want to get the word out about it and you want to tell other people about it, but nobody will listen to you. So you go out and through several years of doing a lot of things and you go out and make a film and you make a documentary about whether it's the healthcare system, whether it's smoking. I mean, look, the movie The Insider was a perfect example of that. I mean, fictionalized to a certain extent, but that was 60 minutes. That was based on a true thing. Okay. But whether it's smoking, whether it's the healthcare system, whether it's AI, whatever it is, okay. And that's how you tell. And that's how the visual arts and media in movies are done. And the first one you may make may not do well. In fact, it may bomb. In fact, you good luck if you get it out there. But then you go out and make another one because you had such a high of making that first one, and that one picks up steam. And then if it picks up steam, you start to get exposure, and you're out there, and you're out there, and by that fourth one, now you're on a red carpet, fighting for an Oscar because not only have you been exposed for wide exposure, but they're that damn good. So that's what film's supposed to do. There has to be a movie you personally were so hyped for, and when you saw it, it was disappointing and you felt robbed. What is it? Um, you know what it was? Burnt. It was so. It was a little movie Bradley Cooper did, and I wrote a piece on it. The headline I reviewed this was Burnt was overrated, undercooked, and essentially, so let me preface it by saying this. He had just come off, Bradley Cooper and Sienna Miller had just come off doing American Sniper. Incredible movie. Phenomenal movie. He gets nominated for Best Actor. He gets nominated for Best Director. It gets nominated for Best Picture. None of them won. Okay. I find out later on that they're going to be doing another movie together called Burnt. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I was excited because when I heard Sienna Miller come on, I went, oh, this is going to be a heck of a movie because she was in. And I saw it. And I was so disappointed. I was I was just like, this is bad. This is horrible. But that goes to show you why story is so important. Because you can have the greatest story in the world, okay, like a Chris Kyle, political views aside, okay, you can have a Chris Kyle, and they does a phenomenal job, and then one story there, same stars, and then you go over here, same stars, and the story is terrible, and it had no bearing that it was based on a true story either, or a biopic. It had no bearing on it. It was just because the same two people were in the film. So yeah, I thought they could have done so much more with that. And at least Vikander was in it. She had a small little role. It just so that is the movie that I felt really, really, really disappointed for. For what it's worth, The Dark Fate chose Arnold's character. I think it felt right. If you look closely, the movie doesn't directly tell you, but it's the last T-800 from a deleted timeline. It's sad. Yeah, and that's when you get a movie. I mean, don't forget one of the major reasons why Terminator Salvation got exposure was because of Christian Bale's rant. That explicit, expletive filled rant. So, and it didn't do well. And Dark Fate, it tried to bring back a Terminator from 40 years ago. It's like, okay. So yeah, I mean, the whole multiverse and everything else, it just didn't do well for it. One film I remember seeing in theaters and absolutely hating was The Predator by Shane Black. You know I have I have no issue changing a few steps in the mythology of a series, but that was too much. No. And that's the thing. Once you start changing everything up, then it starts going south. Predator was a good movie. Call it what it was. It was a good, not great, but it was a good movie. Okay? Arnold was good in that. Carl Weathers was good in that. I think Carl Weathers was in that. Anyways, that was a good movie. Predator 2, not so much with Danny Glover. And once it just started, free fall. So by the time you get to The Predator with Shane Black, it's like, ugh, God, please. Because people are checked out. People are checked out. And they don't care anymore. I mean, hell, even that Alien versus Predator, uh, it was just bad. So actually, it's the one thing that still scares me to this day is that alien thing still scares the living daylights out of me. If I had to look back, though, as awful as the experience was, seeing a Predator film in theaters, it definitely something. But I wish I had seen Predators back in 2010. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they'll remake something. I'm sure they will remake something and try and do it again. Predators was a movie that I judged by its cover and figures. It completely blows me away. Never judged by a movie by its cover. I wish Prey 2 never gets made. Yes, it was. I thought it was Carl Weathers. Yeah, Prey was one of those movies that had it got released in theaters, it would have made a lot of money. It would have made a lot of money. Because that was at a time too where there wasn't anything in theaters. Like it was dry. Completely dry. And yeah. So crazy stuff. Prey was a ripoff of from my friend's fan film Warrior. He even did receive a letter from the studio saying that they wouldn't use his ideas, and guess what they did? So I don't support Bram. I'm sorry about that. I am sorry about that. That's too bad. But unfortunately, that's what they try to do, and I mean, you can't fight it because you're the little guy, they're the big guy, and they'll just put you with paperwork and everything else. The first Alien versus Predator, I gotta say, was phenomenal, and I loved seeing a good Predators siding with the humans. AVP 2, I like the Predator and Pre-Alien, but the film not too much. Yeah, and by the way, it's the same thing with the Alien Covenant. And now that there's going to be another one coming out, in the next couple years, I just don't know what else I can do with it. I just don't know. I mean, I hope that I really hope they're. I love the poster for Alien Covenant, but one thing I was the one Alien movie I didn't really enjoy the movie itself, but Michael Fassbender was Prometheus because he played David and Walter, and it's very difficult to play two different characters. So, yeah. Okay, guys. So that's gonna. It's almost been 2 hours, so I'm gonna wrap this up. But before I go, a couple things. Number one, I'm gonna be back here on Monday, ready to go. Number two, it is so on Thursday. So one of the last comments here is Predator 2 also did a good job in setting up that thing decades ago. It did, yeah. It did. When a sequel, it's so difficult to make a sequel that's much better than the original, so I can completely understand that. Um, so moving forward, next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you guys are going to be getting shows, okay? Thursday, I'm going to be going to see Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, so the preview show. I'll see, it's going to be like a 3 o'clock showtime, so I probably won't do a show, but then again, it depends on what's going on in the news. So Thursday is going to be that, okay? Friday. Oh, well, you know what, though? We do have a little show called Secret Invasion. So I will be doing Secret Invasion Thursday, okay? I will be doing, I totally forgot about it already. Secret Invasion Thursday. So I'll have to do the show earlier for you guys. So there will be no like newsworthy show, but you guys will be getting Secret Invasion on Thursday. Okay. Friday, come back here. We're going to be doing the next Mission Impossible film, and that's going to be Rogue Nation. We're getting closer, guys. We're getting close to July 12th. So we got two left. We got Rogue Nation and we got Fallout. Okay. And then Saturday, okay, Saturday is going to be the spoiler cast for Indiana Jones. Come back here on Saturday. I'll tweet out a schedule, guys, for everybody, and then you can get that out there to everybody you know. Saturday is going to be the spoiler cast, okay, for Indiana Jones. Come back here next Sunday, and we're going to do this all over again for a couple hours. Ask Me Anything Sundays. So, like I said before, whenever there's not a big movie coming out, the Ask Me Anything will be on a Saturday, like today. When there's a big movie coming out, like Indiana Jones, you'll get the spoiler cast on Saturday. You'll get to Ask Me Anything on Sunday. And then we're just going to keep going. Couple of things. Number one, please, guys, if you do nothing else and you pop in here and you leave, please at least hit that like and subscribe button. That way I know you like the content. I know what to give you. Okay. Number two, if you want to support the channel, and I know some of you have been, and thank you very much for your support. Okay. You can do a couple things. Number one, you can go to my Patreon channel. Okay. And you can either get Mob Mondays, which is $5 a month, or Rewatch Wednesdays for $10 a month. And that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is hit the join button. Okay. And there's 3 different levels for you. I made them as cheap as I absolutely possibly could. One is $2.99 a month. One is $5.99 a month. And the other, the top tier, is $9.99 a month. If you do the top tier, you'll get a 1 hour every single month. You'll get a 1 hour monthly private call with me. Um, and then, of course, if you want to head on over to the store and pick up a T-shirt or a mug or, you know, a hoodie, that would definitely support me. Um, and yeah, so that's gonna do it. So do the three things that you guys need to do. Be safe, be careful, and you guys have a great rest of the weekend. Go see a movie and come back here and tell me all about it. So I am David Steele, and you have been watching Real Talks. Bye bye, guys.